Good morning, everybody. We have made it to another Monday, and we have made it to another Seattle Seahawks rookie evaluation. That's right. We are looking at another one of our rookies, and now we're on to day three. We already rolled through the first 2 days, the two top 100 picks. Now we're on to the day three guys, and we're going to lead off here with our first day three pick. This was after a little bit of a trade back with Denver. Tyrice Knight. And this one's going to be kind of tough, mostly because he played for UTEP, and there's very little stuff we have to work with here. I'll just say that. We are going to have to lean pretty heavily on stats and testing numbers, because in terms of watching this guy play, you've got a very limited amount of stuff you can even work with. I'm just going to say that right now. Like, we'll get to the tape stuff later today, but just understand this one's tough. This one's tough to evaluate. So, Tyrice Knight, linebacker from UTEP, a minor. No, he is not from the same school as Reek Woolen was. A lot of people, when we made this pick, wondered if maybe they were teammates, but Woolen went to UTSA. So, Knight, 23 years old, going to be 23 when the season starts. Measurables are mostly on the smaller side. Not so much for the modern game. He's like 6 feet and a half inch tall, which is a little bit shorter than you typically see at the linebacker position. 15th percentile. 233 pounds is light historically, but in the modern NFL, that's actually very common now. So he's about the size you would expect because linebackers have just gotten smaller. Arm length, slightly above average, 32 and a half inches. Pretty good. Hand size, 9 1/4, 23rd percentile. Don't really know if that means much with a linebacker, but they give us the data anyway. 40 time was pretty good, 4.63 40. That's kind of run of the mill for modern linebackers, but it is fast historically because linebackers used to be slower. His 10-yard split was the one thing that really stood out here. This 10-yard split jumps off the page a little bit, 154, 88th percentile. His jumps were both pretty good, a little above average, 34 and a half vert, 9 foot 11 inch broad. I will say that for a guy of this size, you want to see a little bit more. Again, you're comparing him to all linebackers that have gone through the combine process, not just modern ones. So that's not ideal. And his 3-cone and 20-yard shuttle were bad. Real rough, given that he is a little undersized, technically speaking. So, Tyrice Knight, to me, I'm looking at these numbers, he's not really a great athlete so much as he is just fast and quick. So, he's not that prototype linebacker athlete that you would hope for. 21 bench press reps is okay, especially for a smaller guy, relatively speaking. So that's what he is physically. Let's take a look at what he did at UTEP. He was a 3-year starter, 4-year player for the Miners. 2020 was his first year, played 8 games. I think UTEP only played 8 games total because of COVID. So he didn't miss games or anything like that. There were only 8 games to play, I believe. 390 snaps, so he wasn't a full-time player yet, but he was close. 54 tackles, 2.5 for loss, a sack, 5 QB pressures, only 3 missed tackles. That's a pretty impressive missed tackle rate. Got targeted 14 times in coverage, 12 catches allowed, 109 yards allowed, and a 91.1 QB rating in coverage. So not too bad, but this was years ago. This was a long time ago now, so I don't know if we're looking at this stuff for meaning. Most of his, well, not a majority, but more of his snaps were run defense than anything else. 183 run defense snaps, 172 in coverage, 35 pass rush snaps. So he had a good variety. Did play 39 snaps as a defensive lineman, lining up outside the tackle. Lined up in the box 331 times and did get some run in the slot, 20 slot reps. His PFF grades were good all around. Coverage was just okay, but the overall grade was good. The run defense was good. The tackling was really good. The pass rush was real nice. And when you look at it mathematically, 35 pass rush snaps, 5 pressures, and a sack, that is pretty good. And UTEP's defense was not very good, 31 points allowed per game, 76th. Not exactly surrounded with talent over there at UTEP, though, so take it as you will. 2021, his second season and first full year of college football. Played all 13 games for UTEP. 800 plus snaps, 100 tackles, 7.5 for loss. So you're starting to see him develop into a really good gap shooter, someone who's really aggressively attacking the backfield. Excuse me. 2 sacks, a pick, 4 passes defensed, forced fumble, 12 pressures. So he's really starting to expand himself as a QB pressurer. Only 5 missed tackles, which on a season where he had over 100 tackles is really good. So over these first 2 years, he's a very sound and safe and fundamental tackler. He does get picked on in coverage, 49 targets, which is what, almost 4 targets a game, 38 receptions allowed, that's almost 3 catches a game, 355 yards and a touchdown. That's definitely not what you want to see, so he did get beat up in coverage. His QB rating allowed was only 95.2 because he only allowed the 1 touchdown and had the pick, but he got beat up a little bit here. 378 of his snaps in run defense, almost an equal number in coverage, 56 pass rush snaps, so he's getting pressure on, what is that, more than 20% of his pass rush attempts. That's good. Lined up as a defensive lineman 51 times. 50 of them were on the outside of the tackle. One was actually, he was lined up as a defensive tackle. I assume that was like on some kind of one of those 4th and inches where everybody's up on the line to take away the gaps immediately. But over 600 of his snaps came in the box, 129 in the slot, 4 as a corner, outside corner, 3 as a free safety. So he's doing a little bit of everything. He really expands his experience as a slot, but mostly he is just a linebacker. Grades out really well. Improves all around. 81 overall grade, 82.4 run defense grade. Really, really good tackling score, 91. Good pass rush, good coverage. UTEP's defense was actually pretty good this year as well, by the way. 25.2 points allowed per game, which was in the upper half of the country, 53rd. And then that gets us to 2022, and this is where things start to mean a little bit more, I think, because it's recent enough to where it feels like it matters. So UTEP takes a step back as a team. They don't make a bowl game this year, 12 games. So Knight plays almost 750 snaps, 95 tackles, 6.5 for loss. So still doing some gap shooting stuff. He doesn't really seem to take much of a step forward, I will say that. 1 sack, a pick, 5 passes defensed, starting to do some things in coverage. Couple forced fumbles, 17 pressures, so expanding on his ability as a pass rusher. 13 missed tackles, which on a season where you have 95 tackles total, 13, you're getting into negative territory there for sure. Now, he does clean things up in coverage, only gets targeted 25 times, that's twice a game. 18 catches allowed, that's 1.5 a game, 181 yards, 15 a game, 3 touchdowns. QB rating goes way up because of the touchdowns, but he was much less picked on in coverage in 2022. So I guess you take the good with the bad. Run defense, 357 snaps, 300 coverage snaps, 81 in pass rush. So again, normal stuff you would see for a typical linebacker in college football, I think, unless they play on a really good or a really bad team. 50 defensive line snaps, all of them outside the tackle. 560 something in the box, 115 in the slot. 6 is an outside corner and 2 is a free safety. So again, he's doing a lot of stuff as a slot. And when you're a linebacker, again, he played, I believe, will for UTEP, at least in the clips that I saw, he was mostly playing the will. When a dude goes into motion, you just got to follow him over to the slot, and that's where he's playing slot from. Graded out this year not as well. His run defense grade was just okay. His pass rush grade was just kind of okay. Tackling score was pretty good. Coverage was actually a really good score. Big improvement, but overall things went down. UTEP's defense also went down. They went to 27 points allowed per game, which was 72nd. Not great. Bottom half of the country. And now we are at 2023, the most recent season, and the year where he really made a name for himself as a playmaker. 12 games, so he played in all their games. They didn't make a bowl game. 778 snaps, so lots of experience. 140 tackles. So he's averaging well over 10 tackles a game, constantly around the ball, constantly making plays, and 15 and a half tackles for loss. So he becomes a really good gap shooter and a really decisive backfield attacker. Over 1 tackle for loss per game, 4.5 sacks as well, 7 passes defense, so he actually becomes a little bit more of a coverage playmaker. Forces a fumble, 14 QB pressures, which seems like he stepped excuse me. Seems like he stepped back from last year, but he only rushed the passer on 40 snaps. So that is a remarkable success rate for your pass rushes. 15 missed tackles, which is a good amount, but when he has 140 tackles total, I think that's much easier to accept as just the cost of doing business. Targeted 32 times in coverage, 21 catches allowed, 255 yards. Pretty decent. I mean, it's not quite as good as it was the previous year, but it's not anything that I'm alarmed by. 1 touchdown allowed, 104 QB rating. So he kind of really rounded into a good, solid, all-around linebacker in 2023, it feels like. Over 400 snaps of run defense, 333 in coverage. Like I said, only 40 pass rush snaps, so on more than a third, like something like what is that, 40% of his pass rush reps, he gets pressure at minimum. Pretty good. Only took 10 snaps on the defensive line this year, so that kind of got out of his game. 10 snaps outside the tackle. Almost all of his snaps came in the box. He only was playing in the slot about 2 snaps a game, had 4 snaps as a corner, outside corner, and then 11 as a free safety. So he basically became just a guy who played in the box all the time. And it seems like that change did benefit him a little bit as a player. Graded out really well, 83 overall, really good run defense score, really good tackling, really good pass rush, pretty good in coverage, not stellar, but good enough. UTSA's defense was not good. They allowed 28.5 points a game, 88th in the country. That's bad. That's close to the bottom third, or bottom fourth, actually, excuse me, of the country. But, yeah, it was a good all-around year for him. It seems like they reduced his role a little bit to just playing as a box linebacker, and it went well. They took a lot of the slot responsibilities away, the defensive line responsibilities away, and it benefited him. So our totals for his career as a player are 45 games played, over 2,700 snaps, almost 400 tackles, 32 for loss, 8.5 sacks, 2 picks, 16 passes defensed, 4 forced fumbles, 48 QB pressures. And by the way, for his whole career, so that's including when he was very young, that's on 212 pass rush snaps. So that's what, over 20%. Now I know he's an off-ball linebacker, and those guys tend to blitz, and they get more reps where they're just completely unblocked. But still, 36 missed tackles, so he's making almost 11 tackles for every tackle he misses on his career, which, I mean, I think that's okay. It's not ideal, but I think that works fairly well. 120 targets, almost 90 catches, so he is giving up nearly 75% completion rate. 900 yards on those 120 targets, which is tolerable. 5 touchdowns allowed, 102 QB rating allowed. It's all okay. I don't think coverage is going to be his strength, but I don't get the sense he's awful at it. Over 1,300 run defense snaps, almost 1,200 coverage snaps, over 200 pass rush snaps, lined up on the defensive line 150 times, almost 300 slot reps, 14 outside corner reps, 16 free safety reps. But a vast majority of his work comes as a box linebacker, of course, 2,246. And of his snaps lining up on the defensive line, 149 come on the outside of the tackle, and 1 comes as a defensive tackle. All right, so those are the numbers we got. They don't look too bad. They don't look too bad at all. By the numbers, this is a pretty good player. But now we have to try to seek to understand exactly how he's getting these numbers and what he's doing. So another video is going to be coming in a few hours here, and we're going to talk about the player that Tyrice Knight is. And I'm working with limited information here, just straight up. I'm going to tell you guys right now, because finding stuff on this guy at UTEP is hard because it's UTEP.